Hello everybody, and welcome to another special edition of the Reviewing Network Live, a special preview of what's coming up on the fall. And for this particular preview, I wanted to do something a little bit different than what I've been doing for the last couple of these. I've talked about various things that have happened recently, some news stories, some recaps of events that have happened, and this time around I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to take this particular week to talk about something that I've been watching on TV for a number of years now. The latest run of this has come to an end. It's done for the season, so it'll be back in the fall. But I want to talk about Fox's Animation Domination lineup. Now, if you don't know what this is the block that has included such shows as The Simpsons, of course, King of the Hill, Bob's Burgers, Family Guy, American Dad, all these different shows. I wanted to do a video talking about my personal reflections on these shows that I've grown up with pretty much since I was born. I mean, The Simpsons started the year I was born, and these other animated shows I've grown to appreciate more and more over the years. I've seen these shows on Disney+, Hulu, on TV, on FX, FXX, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, the whole shebang. So, for this particular video, I'm only going to cover the main primetime shows. Main primetime animated shows. I'm not going to cover anything from Fox Kids. I might bring it up if something was like a special event that they had or something related to what I'm going to be talking about here. But we have a lot of shows to get to here, so it's best to go back to the beginning. Let's talk about what happened when Fox first started in 1987. So on April 5th, 1987, Fox premiered, and it was not a big rollout at first. They only had a couple of shows that premiered on the first night. Two shows, actually, Married with Children, and then there was the Tracy Ullman Show, and then the other shows that were on that schedule would follow in the weeks to come. But the Tracy Ullman Show plays a big part in our story because, of course, the Tracy Ullman Show is a sketch comedy show created by James L. Brooks, and Sam Simon was one of the producers on there. And one of the most notable things about the show, besides the show itself, which is a pretty funny show when you go back and look at it, was the animated shorts that they had there. They had these animated segments that would play during the commercial breaks, and there's a couple of them. There was actually a couple of them. There was one called Dr. Nigatu, which is done by Klasky Csupo, which was only on for about one season. But the one that everyone knows that I'm talking about is, of course, The Simpsons. The Simpsons premiered in these shorts. The first one was on, I think it was 2 weeks into the show's run on April 19th, 1987. We got the first short, and The Simpsons kind of took over that spot that was supposed to be for a rotating series of animated shorts. And the interesting thing about the show was that Matt Groening, when he pitched this show, he was actually going in to pitch a series adaptation for his Life in Hell comics. But when he realized that maybe this wasn't going to sell and he didn't have another option to him, he decided basically to make a show that's inspired by his own family. So he had a father named Homer, a wife named Marjorie, a sister named Lisa. I think he said he had a sister named Maggie, and he was actually going to call Bart Matt based off of him, but he decided to change the name to Bart because he didn't think that name would work out so well. And The Simpsons proved to be very popular. They had a bunch of bumpers on there. They were quickly promoted to full time. They appeared in every episode of season 2 and season 3. And then in 1989, they were no longer on the Tracy Ullman Show because they were about to get ready to do their own animated show, which is what we're going to delve into first off, of course, and that show was, of course, The Simpsons. The Simpsons premiered on December 17th, 1989, and I don't think I need to say how much of a legacy that the show has had over the years. It's still going on the air after all these years, 34 years now, and the show has been on now for 750 episodes, and the show has still gone strong. It's a show that has been it's been a staple of television for so many years, and it will continue to do so as long as there's still an audience for it. I mean, The Simpsons have made fun of themselves over the years on how long they've been on the air, and one of the best lines was Troy McClure saying, "Who knows what crazy adventures they'll have from now until the show becomes unprofitable." Well, considering that the show has been still going strong after all these years, and now it's owned by Disney, I don't think The Simpsons are going to be going away anytime soon. So, needless to say, if you've been watching my stuff over the years, if you've been to the website over the years, you know that I am a big, big Simpsons fan. The Simpsons is my all-time favorite television show, and what more do I even need to say about The Simpsons? As I said already, it's a classic show, a great show overall, and it's just a show that's just so much fun. It has so many memorable moments, so many great moments of comedy, so many great things that it's inspired over the years. it's a fantastic show. It's a show that continues to be, like I said, a staple of Sunday nights on Fox. And even as a big fan of The Simpsons as I am, I can fully admit that The Simpsons has indeed had had a decline in quality. Like the first 10, it's like the first maybe 10 years of the show are probably the best that The Simpsons have ever done. I just recently watched the show again on Disney Plus, all of it from the very beginning to the most recent season, and like I said before, the first 10 seasons of The Simpsons, I think, are the high mark. The show begins a little bit of a dip in quality, but I think it actually happens later on down the road that people give it credit for. I think it starts right around season 11, but it's still pretty good for at least a couple more seasons. And I think maybe the part where it starts to take one of its first little dry spells is season 15, and I think it's season 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, I think, are one of the few low spots for the show. There are still some good episodes splattered in there, but they're very few and far between. And you can also make the argument that they were making the Simpsons movie at the time. And then season 20, there's a little bit of a bump in there. When they moved to high definition, you can definitely tell that there was a little bit more. There was more of a purpose to actually do something more with these characters, and they actually turned out some really good seasons. And then midway through the 2010s, there's another downfall. There's another downward spiral, like a decline in quality, I should say, not a downward spiral. But I think season 23. It's either season 23. I think season 22, 23, 24, and I think it doesn't really get. It's 22 to 20. I'm trying to think, maybe 29, maybe 28 or 29. That's a little bit of another downward stretch of quality episodes, and I think the show really began to come back around again, probably around the time that the show was bought by Disney, when Fox picked up Disney, and I think season 30 and 31, season 30 upward, I think the show right now is in a good place right now. The show has been getting better and better with each season. They've opened up this room now to more writers in here who could actually work with this material and create some very interesting and very enjoyable episodes. This last season in particular, season 34, which just came to an end a couple weeks ago, I think is some of the best stuff they've done in a long time. They're really experimenting around. They're still coming out with a lot of great material. There's a lot of heartfelt moments. The animation is getting stronger and stronger. There's a point in an episode called Bartless where they show a new Itsy and Scratchy cartoon, and I swear the animation looks like something that could be out of a classic Warner Brothers cartoon or a Disney cartoon. It's that good, and I was really amazed at how the show has been able to find itself again. And it's nowhere near as good as the first 10, 15, 10, 11 seasons, but I gotta say, man, this show is back, man. If you haven't been checking out The Simpsons lately, you really need to be checking it out, because you're missing out on some pretty damn good stuff. This is a show that's really good, really entertaining, still a part of my tradition on Sunday nights. I have to watch The Simpsons no matter what. Even in the downward years, it has to be my Sunday night tradition. So, not much more to say, man. The Simpsons is my favorite TV show of all time. So, and because of that success that they had, everyone was trying to cash in on the success of The Simpsons. There were shows like CBS, ABC tried to create their own Simpsons-style show. It didn't really none of those shows really took off, and probably for good reason, because most of them didn't know what the formula was to create a show just as successful as The Simpsons. Even Fox themselves had some struggles trying to put together a show that could follow The Simpsons in terms of animation-wise. They tried Batman the Animated Series for a couple of months in prime time. That didn't pan out well, even though the show itself was great. They put Eat the Cat on there for a little bit, Tiny Toons, X-Men, Power Rangers, The Tick, but no show really was seen as a true companion to The Simpsons. So, in order to do that, you had to get people from The Simpsons to do it, and in 1994, that's when The Critic comes into play. So The Critic was the first real attempt to try to create a Simpson-esque style show, a more adult show. The problem with shows like Capital Critters and Fish Police and Family Dog was that they really couldn't find the way to be kind of the mix of something that everybody in the family can enjoy. It was more kid stuff with a little bit of an adult edge, but not a whole lot like The Simpsons had. But The Critic was a show that was really very unique for the time. It was written by Al Jean and Mike Reiss, who had worked with The Simpsons for a number of years. James L. Brooks was one of the producers, and The story is pretty simple. You follow a film critic played by Jay Sherman, played by John Lovitz, and he has a show, Coming Attractions, where he takes a look at these really hilarious film parodies, stuff like the Apocalypse Now musical, Howard Stern's End, Honey, I Ate the Kids, The Cockroach King, Son of a Jackass, Son of a Woman. They would parody a lot of movies on there, and most of them were pretty good. And there was a great cast of characters there. It wasn't just a show that was straight up copying the Simpsons formula. They created their own unique thing, and the show was really damn funny. It's a very underrated show that has garnered a huge cult following over the years, and it seemed like it could have been a big success, but there were a couple things in the way. One thing was ABC. When ABC put the show on the air, they picked it up, and one of the big problem was with ABC was that it never really knew where to exactly put the show so it could find success. Like, if they really wanted the show to succeed, they would have put it behind one of their big hits. They would have put it behind something like Home Improvement, or Coach, or Roseanne, or something like that. But ABC put it on after Dinosaurs, and Dinosaurs was a great show, but Dinosaurs and the Critic didn't really mesh together. I mean, it was not a good decision to do that, and ABC quickly canceled the show after half a season, and Fox eventually decided to pick it up afterwards. They gave it another season, and it's interesting how it starts off, because it starts off with a shameless plug crossover with The Simpsons, which is a great episode. A star is Burns, but it's one of the few times that Matt Groening actually took his name off of an episode of his show. He's the creator, and he took it off because he didn't want his name attached to this. And it's just like, compared to some of the other things that you put your name on, I mean, I don't know. Taking your name off of this episode, which is, like I said, a fantastic episode, that seems a little bit much. But you know what? The Critic actually was a huge success. I mean, it was a big hit. It did well after The Simpsons, and it seemed like the show would get picked up for another season. But then Fox basically decided they didn't want it because they weren't making money off of it, because it wasn't their show. It was a show that was produced by Sony, and because of that, they had a third season that was already to go, but they canceled it before the show could even get going. So they did eventually bring it back in some flash webisodes before the internet boom, which was not that great, honestly. Like, I've seen most of them. They really aren't that great compared to the original series. And I mean, The Critic itself is a really damn good show, and it's a shame that the show never really got a chance to get going again. I mean, I would have liked to see what they would do with this in modern times. The parodies they could have with this could be amazing, but it's something that maybe it'll still happen. But I mean, it's really hard to get your hopes up after all these years. But regardless, this is still a very funny show that did find an audience because of reruns on Comedy Central. Comedy Central kind of helped it find its audience, and eventually when it got released to DVD, it was a huge hit on there, and it's found a legacy after all these years. It's still a show that's very funny. It's still a show that's very creative and very unique. It's still a really damn good show, and it still holds up after all these years. And man, if you have not seen this show, I highly recommend checking it out. You will not be disappointed by it. If you love The Simpsons, you're going to love The Critic. So a couple years pass, and we get to 1996 and 97, when Mike Judge decided to leave Beavis and Butthead to do a show with Simpsons writer Greg Daniels. That show, of course, would be King of the Hill, which actually premiered in January of 97, even though Mike Judge still had a Beavis and Butthead movie that was still in theaters at that point, and he had one more season of Beavis and Butthead that would air that following fall in 97. So that was an interesting time for him. King of the Hill is a show where pretty much a similar concept to The Simpsons. You have a story that centers around the fictional town of Arlen, Texas, and you center on the Hill family, their neighbors, co-workers, relatives, classmates, friends, whatever. And Hank Hill, played by Mike Judge, works as an assistant manager at Strickland Propane. He lives in a ranch-style house with Peggy, Bobby, his niece Luann, and his pet bloodhound Ladybird. And his friends are Bill Dauterive, a divorced, bald, overweight military barber, Dale Gribble, a paranoid pro-gun, anti-government pest exterminator, and Boomhauer, a charismatic, soft-spoken, often unintelligible bachelor. And what makes the show different compared to The Simpsons is that it tackles more of a realistic approach, seeing humor in the conventional and mundane aspects of everyday life. You get stuff like blue-collar workers, substitute teachers, the trials of puberty, political correctness, and that made the show very clever for its own on its own rights. It's a show that was really, it's a slice of life show. It's the best way to describe it. It's a slice of life show that really, I think, actually did its job a lot better than The Simpsons did with a realistic approach. Because by the time King of the Hill came on the air, The Simpsons was kind of falling more into more of a it's not much of the realistic approach that it started with. But King of the Hill kind of takes that to another level, because most of the time on King of the Hill, it did take the realistic approach. There would be those times when it would go a little bit over the top, specifically stuff like the infamous Pygmalion episode with Michael Keaton, where he wants to turn Luann into a replica of his company, and then later on wants to take her brain out of. It's a crazy episode it's a crazy episode involving Michael Keaton dressed up in a pig costume, and him getting killed off in a way that was very unusual for King of the Hill. It's a very interesting episode there, but the show itself was very good. It ran for 13 seasons, and for the most part, it never really lost what made that show so good. It was a really great show that really worked on so many levels. You liked the characters a lot. You got attached to their stories very quickly. There was never any real point where you thought that this show was never really failed to entertain you. It was a show that really did a very good job of staying very consistent throughout the course of its run. I mean, there's dry spots, but they're not as much as you would think they are. They're not as much as The Simpsons had, but it is still it was still a very entertaining show all around. I think they did a very good job for the majority of its run to really get their point across and make for a show that not only has held up very well, but has gotten a lot better as time goes on. And they just recently announced that the show's going to be getting a revival on Hulu, so it's going to be very interesting to see how that works. So, yeah, King of the Hill was a really damn good show. I don't think I need to say that because I think most of you have already seen that show, but it's definitely worth your time if you haven't seen it. So, kind of thanks to this boom in primetime animation with King of the Hill, the Beavis and Butthead spinoff Daria, as well as South Park, more animated shows were being greenlit at the networks, and Fox was the one that was putting out the most ones at the time. In 1999, they put 3 different animated shows on there. One of them was the PJs, which is a stop-motion animated show that aired in 1999 and ran for a couple of years. Created by Eddie Murphy and Larry Wilmore, as well as Steve Tompkins. You basically have a public housing project modeled after the Cabrini Green housing projects in Chicago, and you follow Eddie Murphy, who plays Thurgood Stubbs, who is the superintendent of the building, and you follow the misadventures around with the people in that building. And again, it was a really good show, but it was one of those shows that it was a stop-motion show, and stop-motion takes a long time to do. And for a show like this that has to have a number of episodes out at a specific time, yeah, it's a long time to put these shows together. 44 episodes of the show aired over the course of its run. Each of them took over 2 months to produce because of the stop-motion process. And Eddie Murphy, he's credited on every episode as Thurgood Stubbs, but then later Phil Morris from Jackie Childs from Seinfeld, he would actually provide the voice of Thurgood in these episodes, even though Murphy was credited in those. Murphy did not want to show up on Sundays to record the voices, so the producers hired Morris to record his lines, and he worked in a separate booth from the other actors, allowing the producers to replace Morris's recordings with Murphy's voice in case Murphy decided he wanted to record his dialogue. After a couple of years it was on Fox, it actually moved to the WB in 2000, but the high budget, the declining ratings led to it being canceled not but a year later. And it was in syndication for a while. It was on Adult Swim for a little bit, but now it's been available on DVD for a number of years, but you can watch it on streaming. Pluto TV, NBC Peacock has it on there too. It was a pretty good show. It was very well animated. It was still very funny. It was still very clever. It was a unique show. But yeah, the whole thing about the big problem with it was the production. It was because they were putting these. There was a long. Stop motion takes a long time to do, and to do as many episodes as they wanted you to do, it was tough to keep the show going for that long. And as much as I wish the show would continue, I could see why they ended it, but it doesn't take away from the fact that the PJs was still a pretty damn good show when it came out. You should check it out for yourself if you can find it. I'm sure you can find the DVDs out there, or go to Peacock and watch it. If you like Eddie Murphy's comedy, you'll definitely like the show a lot. It's a very good show. There were two other shows on Fox that came out in 1999, and one of the first ones was Family Guy, which got a big boost after premiering after the Super Bowl that year in 1999. Family Guy, it's pretty much the same concept as The Simpsons, and a little bit of King of the Hill too. You follow this family in Massachusetts, in Quahog, Rhode Island, the Griffins, a dysfunctional family consisting of Peter Griffin, Lois Griffin, their children named Chris and Stewie, their pet dog Brian, who could talk. It's set in the fictional city of Quahog, Rhode Island, like I said, and exhibits much of the humor of a metafictional cutaway, of stuff like metafictional cutaway gags that often lampoon American culture. And needless to say, they took a lot from The Simpsons, even to the point where the show even admits that they've taken a lot from The Simpsons in later years. But of all the shows that we talked about, Family Guy was the one that had the most interesting story behind it. I mean, this was a show that was canceled in 2000, but fan petitions convinced Fox to give it another season, and they ended it again in 2002 after those 3 seasons. But then again, you put it up against NBC's then dominant must-see TV lineup. Yeah, the show's not going to last very long, and that's what they did, especially in the second and third seasons. They dumped it on Thursday night, on the same night as Friends and Frasier and Will and Grace. And yeah, what did you think was going to happen? But the show was canceled in 2002, but shortly afterward, it started airing on Cartoon Network, and slowly but surely, people came around to it again. Ratings for the shows got bigger in those reruns on Cartoon Network. In fact, it helped Adult Swim actually beat out several networks at the time in cable television. And when the DVD sales were so good, Fox basically decided they had to bring it back. They brought back Family Guy on May 1st, 2005, and ever since then, it's been a large success to that network. It's been on the air for 21 years. It's got 2 more seasons on the way, and as far as Family Guy goes, it definitely it's the same thing that The Simpsons had. It has a good stretch of episodes. I'd probably say maybe the first 6-7 seasons are probably the show's best, and then right around 2010 is when it kind of starts to dip down a little bit. But there were still episodes in there that were still very good, splattered in there, and there were unique ideas that they had. Some of them didn't work out so well, but sometimes they did eventually work out in the end that actually were very unique ideas. But there were times when the show kind of got its head up its ass. Sometimes they did these episodes where they thought they were better than other people. There were times when they tried to do series episodes that didn't work out so well. I think the point where I first stopped watching Family Guy was when they did the whole thing about, they made the controversial decision about Brian getting killed off, and the fact that they were promoting it as, this is permanent, this is something that's going to be permanent forever. Like, whatever character dies on Family Guy is dead forever. That they set it up that way. And that was part of the marketing campaign they had for it. And then they did the thing. There was like 3 episodes where Brian wasn't there, and then in the 3rd episode, they were just like, nah, we're just kidding. Brian's coming back, and we're just going to pretend these last 3 episodes never happened. So that kind of ticked me off a little bit. And there was a couple of other things that made me want to turn away from Family Guy at that point. And once in a while, I check back in. Like, I was there watching the Simpsons crossover, but other than that, though, there was a good stretch of time when I really did not pay attention to Family Guy as much anymore. But kind of like The Simpsons, I kind of came back to it recently. I rewatched a couple of the latest seasons, and I gotta say, Family Guy is coming back. It's not coming back in the same way that The Simpsons came back, but it's definitely coming back in a way that it's giving me hope that this show's going to get back to its original form. The last couple of seasons have been really good. Kind of like with The Simpsons, they brought in a whole new writing crew that's not as, they're more than willing to make fun of themselves. They're more than willing to make fun of other shows without completely insulting them. Like, there was a stretch where they really went after Bob's Burgers for no reason whatsoever. Like it, not even in a way that says that they respect them like The Simpsons do. Like, you really felt like they hated Bob's Burgers too in some of these early episodes. But it's just like, as soon as they got these new writers in there, they've been much more nicer to those shows. But they also make fun of them at times. But when they make fun of them, it never feels like they legitimately hate them. It feels like something that's in good taste. I mean, but like I said, Family Guy, it's still going on right now. It's coming back, but it hasn't gone to the same levels that The Simpsons has in the most recent seasons. But it's moving in the right direction. I'm really looking forward to seeing if that track will continue in seasons to come, because the show is getting back to its original roots again. It is starting to get much funnier again, so I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens there with that show. So that's Family Guy. So around the time that Family Guy and the PJs was also around, there was a show called Futurama, which was Matt Groening's follow-up to The Simpsons. And you could say that this was a show that was very different from The Simpsons. It wasn't a show that was directly in a similar fashion to The Simpsons. It was a show that worked on its very own way. Like, the main story is that you're following this slacker, Philip J. Fry, voiced very well by Billy West, who is cryogenically preserved for 1,000 years and is revived on December 31st, 2999. And he finds work at an interplanetary delivery company, working alongside this one-eyed alien that we later find out is a mutant, Leela, and this robot named Bender. And the show is essentially a workplace sitcom revolving around everybody who works in the Planet Express company. You follow not just the employees of Fry, Leela, and Bender, but you also follow the professor, Hubert Farnsworth, who is also Fry's distant nephew and technical descendant. You follow Herbie's comrade, who's a 36-level bureaucrat, Zoidberg, who is the doctor in the office building, Amy Wong, who's an incredibly rich, blunt, ditzy, and accident-prone, yet sweethearted long-term intern at Planet Express. You also follow other characters like Zap Brannigan, who was originally going to be played by Phil Hartman, but later died before the production began, so they replaced it with Billy West. His assistant Kit. You follow the antagonist of the show, Mom. Leela has a pet Niblonian named Nibbler, who actually speaks, voiced by Frank Welker. The show takes place in 31st century times, and this show is another one that's been consistently good, kind of like American Dad, that has really, like, you always expect the show to have that point where it's just like, okay, when is the show going to be on a downward spiral? When's the show going to not be as funny as it is? But they've managed to find a way to create a show that has not only been consistently good, but every time it comes back, it gets better and better and better. The most recent finale that they had for the show, the last episode, Meanwhile, is one of the best episodes of the show. It's a very solid piece of entertainment that's not only very funny, but also very dramatic, too. It blends comedy and drama very well here, especially at that point in the show's run. It's a fantastic show, and the show is getting ready to come back. There's a new season that's coming out next month, at the end of next month, and I'm a little worried because I think they're on a good path right now. I think they found a perfect way to end it with season 7, so I am really worried about what they're going to do with this new revival of shows. But considering how well of a job they've done over the years, it's a show that I'm really still looking forward to seeing what they do with it next. It's a show that's fantastic. It's a great show, and it's Futurama, man. It's a great show. I don't think I need to say anything more about that show that hasn't already been said. And because of the Family Guy revival, Fox actually gave Seth MacFarlane another show to do, which would be American Dad. American Dad, again, kind of has a similar feel to Family Guy, where you basically have the same kind of concept. You have a show centering around you follow the Smith family, and this is a family that takes place in a fictionalized version of Langley, Virginia, with the father, Stan Smith, who works for the CIA, his wife Francine, their hippie college-age daughter who's a leftist, Haley, their dorky son, Steve. There's 4 other main characters, including Haley's boyfriend, Jeff Fisher, who starts off as a supporting character, but as the series goes on, he does become part of the main cast overall. Klaus, the goldfish that talks, who has the brain of an East German athlete, and Roger the alien, who's a flamboyant, hedonistic, self-serving master of disguise. And there's also Roger's ex-tumor son, Rogu, as well as Avery Bullock, played by Patrick Stewart, who's the deputy director of the CIA. And the interesting thing about American Dad, out of all the shows that I've covered on here so far, this show has really been the most consistently funny. And this is a show that's been going on now for 20 years. For 20 years now, the show's been going on. This show has been so much more funnier than for a number of years. There's never been a true dry spot like it was with The Simpsons and Family Guy. They're still pulling out quality stuff after all these years. And even though the show was on Fox for 9 seasons before they eventually moved to TBS, the show has still been very funny. It seems like when they moved to TBS, there's a sense that the show has become more... For one thing, American Dad doesn't lean heavily on the cutaway gags like it does at the beginning of its run. It instead derives its humor mostly from the characters that they have, the relationship between family members, the relatable plots, and also gonzo over-the-top humor, and often absurd but grounded by family story, plot lines, real-world issues. I mean, this is a show that has remained of high quality for a number of years, and it's amazing to think about that. when you really delve into all of what the show has become since its inception. I mean, it's a really damn good show that still is very strong after all these years. They are right now in the middle of their 20th season, and like I said, it's a show that has been consistently funny all these years. And if you have not seen this show, I'd highly recommend checking it out. Even if you're not the biggest American Family Guy fan, you'll love American Dad. So about 20 years worth of quality shows there. You got The Simpsons, you had The Critic, you had King of the Hill, PJ's Family Guy, Futurama, American Dad, and then 2009 came around, and you started to kind of see a little bit of a dip in the quality of the shows that they were putting out, because King of the Hill ended in 2009, September 13th, 2009 to be exact, and they replaced that show with a Family Guy spin-off series, this one centering around Cleveland Brown, and that is, of course, The Cleveland Show. And in The Cleveland Show, you follow Cleveland Brown. He goes to... The original plan is for him to go to Los Angeles to run a baseball team, because that was kind of a running gag for spin-off shows, where you take a character and give him like an odd job. They'd be like in a detective agency, or they'd be running a bar, or they'd be doing those type of things. But he goes back to his hometown of Langley Falls, Virginia. Or not Langley Falls, Virginia. Actually, what is that place? Let me see. I know this is dead air, but I don't really want to change my... Where the heck are they going? Stoolbend, Virginia. Okay, it's in Virginia, but I said Langley instead of Stoolbend. Langley is American Dad, but yeah, sorry for the dead air there. But he comes back there. He sees an old love of his named Donna, who's played by Sanaa Lathan, and she invites her over to her place, where her children, Roberta and Rollo Tubbs, are there. And Roberta was voiced by, in the first couple of episodes, she was actually voiced by Neil Long, but then midway through the first season, they replaced her with Regan Gomez Preston. And you could say that I'd say it definitely worked a lot better. When Neil Long was the voice of Roberta, you could definitely tell that this was an older woman playing this teenager, and I thought the changeover worked a lot better there. And then you have Rollo, who's played in the show by the voice of Cleveland, Mike Henry, and he's kind of the Stewie of the show, but not quite as evil as Stewie was in the early years. But you could tell that the show was very much like Family Guy. It had the same type of humor, the cutaway gags, the lampooning American culture, and yet it uses significantly fewer than Family Guy did. And I mean, I'm very conflicted on the Cleveland Show. I watched it when it was on. It was on after The Simpsons. It was on right before Family Guy was. And while I don't think the show is that great, I don't think the show is that bad either. It's a real tough call with a show like this. And I've seen the show more than most of the other Fox shows that we've talked about so far, because it's been the one that's been consistently played the most on shows like on networks like Comedy Central and FXX. I mean, on the positive side, all the characters they could have spin off, Cleveland Brown seemed like the most toughest character to do, largely because of the fears that the show might expose the racial humor that could have come for this. But then again, he did a spin-off with Joe Swanson. Most of the jokes would be handicap jokes, or if Quagmire got a show, it would be all sex offender jokes. I thought they did a pretty good job of expanding Cleveland's family and world with these characters. They are very likable characters. I mean, the supporting characters, which seemed like they weren't even trying from the initial ideas. I mean, one of them is a bear. How's that going to work? They somehow make it work. They got a lot of good voice talents to play these roles. Seth MacFarlane, of course, Henry, Jason Sudeikis, Ariana Huffington, Nat Faxon, Jamie Kennedy, Will Forte, Craig Robinson. They got David Lynch. I mean, they made it work. But, you know, in terms of the negative aspects of the show, there aren't as many laugh-out-loud episodes that Family Guy has, and so even some of the best episodes of The Cleveland Show are very few and far between. Not to say that there are bad episodes, but there are a lot of episodes that are just okay, and every once in a while there will be that one gem of an episode that worked. Like, I would say that each season has about maybe 5+ episodes of the show that are actually good, while Family Guy would usually have about half of that, at least during that stretch. But for me personally, I think the best episode they did was the parody of Die Hard, which was basically their answer to this Family Guy's ripping of Star Wars. It's a good parody. It features some of the best jokes the show has ever done. A combination of the scene where John McClane jumps over the building in the fire hose while also calling back to Cleveland's most notable running gag in Family Guy is pitch perfect. It's a really good show. It's a really good episode, I should say. There would be times when the Cleveland Show would be desperate for laughs at the humor tried to do just wouldn't come together and work. Family Guy, at least when they stretch the joke, tries to do it under the idea that there may be a good punchline, but with the Cleveland show, they're really stretching for jokes at times. They're just most of them don't end up working out. Even when there's callbacks to the original show, there would be times they would do something related to Family Guy and it would make no sense. The first episode of the third season has an episode where Cleveland is upset when he finds out that Peter came to Stool Band and did not call him to hang out. And Cleveland and his friends get into this deliverance type of situation, and Peter comes in to save the day, but he has someone else to help him, and it's the monkey from Chris's closet. And not even the evil monkey that could talk and understand everybody, the same evil monkey that did nothing but point at people, and that's it. I mean, there were also times when the Cleveland show was forcing the storyline that Cleveland wasn't the same Cleveland Jr. we saw back in Forefather, because he's clearly a lot bigger than he was in that episode. And they make the argument that he's part of this big secret spy operation. This is happening during the last season of the show. I mean, maybe it's kind of the equivalent to when Meg shows off a Russian accent in that episode of Family Guy where they make the argument that maybe she's a spy. But at least on Family Guy, Mila Kunis was born as a Russian, and they play into that on the show. While Cleveland Jr. has the side story, it does not feel natural or make sense at all. It feels like somebody that was just sticking stuff on the wall and saying, keep trying. And something that I've noticed a lot on this show and watching it over and over again, I realize that the women on this show are more buxom than Family Guy are. Like, their boobs are, like, their breasts are hanging out more a little bit. Like, even the older people on the show, it seemed like they have more cleavage on the show than most of the women on Family Guy, which is still very, very odd. I mean, it's tough to get a real grasp on the show itself. There was nothing about the show that was terrible, but there was nothing that made it stand out on the same level that Family Guy did. It's kind of a mess show. I mean, sometimes they'll have that brief flash of blatantness to it, but most of the time it's just kind of there. And I hate that since they brought him back onto Family Guy, the family has been mostly silent. Like, the only person who's ever really said anything on there has either been Donna or Cleveland Jr. Rollo and Roberta have hardly ever said anything. They only show up in the background every once in a while, and I don't even think they go to the same school that the rest of the Griffin family goes to. Like, what was the point of bringing them back in here if you really weren't going to do anything with them? I mean, it's a show that maybe if they got another chance to do it again, I would be curious to see how they would do it. I mean, but other than that, it was an okay show. It wasn't anything too grand or spectacular, but for what the show was, it was fine for what it is, but it definitely could have been a whole lot better. And like I said, we were kind of getting to this point in 2009 when the shows that they were putting on they weren't great shows, but they weren't bad shows either, and they certainly weren't on the same level as something like the shows that made that night so special, that night of Animation Domination. They had a show called Sit Down, Shut Up, which features a great cast. It's made by the same people that did Arrested Development, and it even features Jason Bateman and Will Arnett in it, and that was a good show, but it wasn't a great show either. They had these other shows that were mostly mixed bags. Sometimes you get a winner like Axe Cop or High School USA or Golan the Insatiable or Napoleon Dynamite, but then you'd have shows like Alan Gregory and Border Town, which were just ideas that seemed like they had potential, but they just did not work out in the end. They did, however, find one little gem in there during that little stretch between 2009 and 2014. And that show was, of course, Bob's Burgers. Bob's Burgers is a show that's created by Lauren Bouchard, who also did Home Movies. This is a show that's also developed by Jim Dotrieve of King of the Hill fame. And the premise of the show, again, pretty simple and kind of sticks to the formula that Fox's other family animated shows have. You follow this family, the Belcher family, Bob and Linda and their 3 children who run a hamburger restaurant and often go on adventures of many kinds. And not like the crazy adventures like the shows like Family Guy or The Simpsons would. Kind of like with King of the Hill, it's more down to earth. It's more of a slice of life show. And the most interesting thing about the show is that most of the family is voiced by different people. Is mostly voiced by men. I mean, Linda is voiced by Dan Mintz. Linda is voiced by John Roberts. Tina is voiced by Dan Mintz, and the only one who in the cast who actually fits the only people in the voice cast that actually fits their gender is Kristen Shaw, who plays Louise, Gene is voiced by Eugene Merman, and Bob, of course, is H. John Benjamin, and Teddy is voiced by Larry Murphy. But I think it's very interesting that two of the leading family members are voiced by men. I think that's a very interesting concept, and surprisingly, it actually does kind of work. And you really do buy the camaraderie between this family. You really like these characters a lot. They're written very funny. They're written very hilariously. They're voiced by really talented people, and you just get so invested in their adventures that they have. These are adventures that are not that grand or spectacular, but like I said, they're a slice of life type of thing. And I will say this, the show starts off pretty slow. Like, the first season doesn't get off to the best of starts. The first couple of episodes are not that great. Halfway through the season, it does eventually find its way, and as the series goes on, the jokes get much funnier. The animation overall just gets really incredible. I don't know why Family Guy had to go off on the show for so many years, but this is a show that's still freaking hilarious after all these years. Like, there's a reason why I was so excited for the Bob's Burgers movie, and I loved it so much that I made Gene's napkin instrument that he made in the movie. I mean, I just love that movie so much. I love the show so much. I mean, it's a show that still has continued to be strong all these years. It has great musical numbers. I mean, the world is just amazing. The voice work is top-notch. You love hanging out with all these characters, and the show is just a good, fun time. It's a show that's just so amazing, so enjoyable, and so freaking hilarious after all these years. It's a show that still holds up after all these years. It's still one of the best shows on the lineup. If you haven't been watching Bob's Burgers, definitely give it a watch. I will say, though, expect the first season to not be that great, but after that, it gets really, really good, and you will not be disappointed by what you see from that show. So, that's Bob's Burgers. And most recently, Fox has had a number of animated shows that have been pretty good. I mean, but the big problem is they've been getting canceled so quickly. Like, they put them on for a couple of seasons, and then they're just gone almost immediately. Bless the Hearts is an example of a show that actually kind of has the same feeling of Bob's Burgers. It starts off kind of slow, but as the show goes on, it actually does become something really enjoyable. The show is basically kind of like King of the Hill in a way. Some people even consider it to be kind of a spiritual successor to King of the Hill, which you follow this family that lives in North Carolina. The main protagonist is this waitress named Jenny Hard, who's voiced by Kristen Wiig. She struggles to make ends meet and lives with her artistically talented daughter, Violet, played by Jillian Bell, and her mother, Betty, played by Maya Rudolph. Her boyfriend, Wayne, is voiced by Ike Barinholtz and has been dating Jenny since her daughter, Violet, was a toddler and acts as a father figure in her life. And Jenny works at this place called The Last Supper, a religious-themed restaurant with her best friend, Brenda, and Brenda is played by Fortune Feimeister. And the show was created by Emily Spivey, and Emily Spivey is a name that has been behind some really good stuff. She was on She did work for Saturday Night Live. She worked on Bless the Hearts, and she cited King of the Hill as a major influence for creating this show, and that's why the Megalomar has been featured in several episodes of this show. Like I said, the first season is not that great, not because of the voice acting. I think the voice acting is really good. The characters are fun. I just don't think the comedy wasn't really that strong. But the second season was really good. I was really impressed at how much they really bumped up the comedy, and it actually made for a really entertaining show that I was so disappointed that it got canceled. It never really got a chance to really shine on there, and it never really found a way to really get itself going. I mean, it was a show that really was really enjoyable. It was a really enjoyable show, and it never really got a chance to get going. But if you can find the show anywhere, I'd highly recommend checking it out. I don't know if it's still on Hulu, but if it's still on Hulu, I'd say definitely check out Bless the Hearts, and you might be surprised by it. Another show that I thought was very good but got canceled a little bit too early was Duncanville, which is another family animated comedy series, this time with Amy Poehler at the forefront of it. And you have Mike Scully and Julie Scully, who worked on The Simpsons in the past. And you follow this boy named Duncan Harris, who's played by Poehler, who also plays the mother. And he's always one step away from making a bad decision, along with Duncan living with his family. And he's a meter maid who dreams of becoming a detective. His father, Jack, tries to be a better father figure to him. His younger 12-year-old sister is Kimberly, who's an angsty, awkward teenager going through normal teen phases. He has an adopted Asian sister named Jing, who's an intelligent 5-year-old, and he has an on-again, off-again crush with this girl named Mia. And you have all these other characters: Yangtze, Beck, Wolf, the Harris's neighbor, Helen Dingens, and Annie's common brother, Stan the Man. And it's a really solid cast. Ty Burrell plays the father, Ricky Lindholm plays Duncan's sister, Zach Cherry plays Wolf, You've got Rashida Jones playing Mia. Wiz Khalifa plays the teacher that he befriends in the show. It was a really good show. It was a show that was of quality throughout the course of its run, and the animation got better as the show went on. It had 2 really good seasons on Fox, but then they decided to just cancel the show without really giving it a chance to really succeed. After the 3rd season, they let it go after only 10 episodes, and then the last 6 episodes were forced out on Hulu, and that's a show that I think is no longer on Hulu since they had the big cleaning up at Disney Plus and Hulu. But if you could find this show somewhere, I'd highly recommend checking it out, because it was really one of those really great shows that was canceled way ahead of its time. I think it was a show that really could have been something really special if it had gotten more time on the air. But it was a great show. I'd really recommend checking it out. Probably the most successful show that they've had in terms of the newer animated shows has been The Great North, which is a show that is produced by the same team that's made Bob's Burgers. Unlike American Dad, it's not created by Lauren Bouchard, but it's actually created by the Molyneux sisters, who have worked on the show worked on Bob's Burgers for a long time. Lily Molyneux Logan and Wendy Molyneux, and also Minty Lewis, best known for her work on Regular Show. It follows kind of a similar theme to Bob's Burgers. You follow this fisherman, Beef Tobin, played by Nick Offerman, who's a single father living in this fictional town of Lone Moose, Alaska, with his 4 children. Wolf, played by Will Forte. Ham, who's played by Paul Rust. Judy, who's played by Jenny Slade. And Moon, played by Aparna Nachierla. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Aparna Nachierla. If I'm not pronouncing the name right, I apologize, but that's just how I'm seeing it right here. So, anyway, his life is centered on raising his children and keeping the family together. Wolf actually is married to Honeybee, played by Dulcie Sloan, and she's been married to him for a good majority of the series. I don't know if they were married at the beginning of the series. I have to check back again, but kind of like with Bob's Burgers, it's the show that really takes a while to get to. The first season I will say it's stronger than the first season of Bob's Burgers, but it's still not a great show at the beginning, but it definitely gets better as it goes along. The animation overall gets a lot better, the jokes get a lot better, and you do like seeing these characters around a lot more. I like this concept. I've talked about it before. I love the concept of shows and movies that take place in the snow. And of course, this takes place in Alaska, where you see a lot of snow, and it makes it, and the nice winter feel throughout the course of the show. It's very well done. It's a very unique, stylized show, and it does find a way to kind of distance itself from Bob's Burgers in a way. It doesn't feel like a show that's completely straight on Bob's Burgers' tail feathers, but it feels like a mix between. It feels like a small mix of Bob's Burgers as well as a little bit of Northern Exposure, which I really do like that, because I do love Northern Exposure. So, but yeah, The Great North is a really good show. I would highly recommend checking that show out too, because it's had this benefit of being on after The Simpsons and being in between The Simpsons and Bob's Burgers on Sunday nights, and I think that's why it's been such a hit for them. But I don't think a lot of people really know that the show is really that good. It is really good. Like I said, the first season you might have to struggle a little bit to get to, but it's worth it when you get to the next couple of seasons. It's a show that's really good. I am glad to see that it's getting another season, so at least this show has found success in this time when it seems like Fox cancels shows that are usually around for only a couple of seasons, and then that's it. And finally, the last show I'll cover on here is the most recent show that was premiered on Fox, and that is Housebroken. It's a show that's created by Jennifer Crittenden from The Simpsons, Clea Duvall, who you'll remember from such movies as Argo and also The Faculty and But I'm a Cheerleader, Identity, Zodiac. She's been in a lot of movies, and also Gabrielle Allen. And the show is kind of reminiscent to a show like Web Therapy, and I'm going to tell you why in just a second, because you basically have a show that follows an anthropomorphic therapy dog played by Lisa Kudrow. Of course, Lisa Kudrow was on Web Therapy, and it feels like that character from that show is this character in dog form. And her name is Honey. She explores human dysfunctions and neurosis by applying her knowledge of psychology, psychiatry, through leading a group of other anthropomorphic neighborhood animals in group therapy sessions. It has a really good cast to it. Clea Duvall plays Elsa, who's this power-hungry, know-it-all corgi and service dog in training. The most recent episodes, I've really grown to like her as a character. She's probably one of my favorite characters on the show. You have Nat Faxon, who plays Chief, who's a Saint Bernard and Honey's mate while who enjoys eating socks, playing a mug, and licking himself. He also plays a macaw in this show, as well as the neglectful owner of Chico. Chico, in which is played by Sam Richardson, who is a very naive tabby cat. Will Forte is also in the show, playing a tortoise with intimacy issues and a shoe fetish. Tony Hale plays a couple of characters. He plays Diablo, who's an anxious, sweater-wearing mixed-breed terrier with OCD. And he also plays George Clooney's Berkshire pig named Max, who's like, this sounds completely ridiculous, but in the show, it kind of makes sense. You have Sharon Horgan, who plays Tabitha, an aging Persian cat and a retired beauty queen. You have Jason Mantzoukas from Close Enough, and also the lead playing the Gray One, a small street-smart Russian blue cat who lives around with about 40 or 60 other cats and has a crush on Tabitha, who wouldn't give her the time of the day. And you have other characters. Maria Bamford is in the show, Greta Lee, Brescia Webb, Brian Tyree Henry. Brian Tyree Henry actually has one of the more intriguing characters on the show. He plays a wild coyote who Honey has a crush on, and I don't know if he's actually been in the most recent season. I'd have to double check again, but I just thought that was kind of amusing. You have Timothy Simmons from Veep playing a raccoon. Nicola Dietz from Steven Universe plays a cat that lives with Tabitha named Kit Kat, and it's just a great cast overall here. There's so many talented people involved in here. The show kind of starts off slow, like with the Great North and Bob's Burgers, but I gotta say the second season has been really, really strong. I've been really enjoying a lot of these more recent episodes, and there's been some pretty hilarious episodes. There's one where Diablo gets testicle implants, and he gets the confidence to leave the group and become king of the dog park, and the way that they shoot this dog with these big testicles is that there's always something standing in front of her, and it's like conflicting with the other characters on the show. It's actually pretty damn hilarious, and may actually be my favorite episode they've done up to this point. The status of the show right now is kind of mixed right now. I don't know if it's going to get another season or not. Supposedly it's getting a third season, but it was one of those quietly announced renewals, and there hasn't been an official word on whether or not the show is indeed coming back next season. But I mean, I hope it is, because it looks like they're heading in the right direction for what the show could be like. But like I said, kind of like with the Great North and Bob's Burgers, I'd say check it out, but I'd say get through the first couple of episodes, and slowly but surely it will start to become something that I think could actually work. Hopefully it will get another season, and hopefully it will continue. Hopefully Fox will keep one of these newer animated shows along for more than a couple of seasons, but we will see. And with that said, that's kind of where we are right now with Animation Domination. Those are most of the main shows I wanted to cover here. There's a couple of other shows that are coming up next year. Grimmsburg with John Hamm involved in the cast, and then there's Crapopolis, which Fox has been building the show up so much. Like, they already renewed it for a second season and then a third season before the show even premiered. It's a show that's trying to use, like, the gimmick with the show is that it's using things that are recreated on the blockchain, and Fox is trying to enter the NFT business, which NFTs, as you could talk, non-fungible tokens, which that should probably tell you right there about what this technology, about how much they believe in the show, because like they're still trying to make NFTs a thing, and I'm sorry, NFTs are not going to be a thing. Bitcoin's not going to be a thing. And again, I'm just saying that right now. Like, as much as you want to try to keep pushing it on us, it's not going to be a thing. And the fact that the show's been already given 3 seasons before an episode has even made it onto the air once, they're really trying to keep this, to buy into this investment. Or maybe they actually have a good idea. It could be interesting, but I don't know. The designs are not looking so good. And as much as I like Dan Harmon, who also did Community and Rick and Morty, just this concept, just the fact that we've been building the show up for so many years now, this show's going to have to be incredible to really become a big success. And I don't think that's going to be the case, but who knows? We'll see what happens. There's also another slew of animated shows that are in development right now, but I basically covered the ones that I wanted to cover here. Like I said, Animation Domination has been a part of my life for it's pretty much since I was born, going back to the days of The Simpsons, and what it is right now with them, Bob's Burgers, The Great North, and Family Guy. These are shows that are still a prominent part of my regular TV watching schedule. I will watch these shows all the time. I'll watch reruns of the shows that are no longer with us. I mean, this is a block that still is one of the last few great TV traditions that I have, and it's something that I hope continues going on in the future. I'm very curious to see if another show comes around that will be in that same level as these shows that we've gotten used to over the years. But like I said, only time will tell, and we'll see what happens. So So that's the kind of the history of of Fox's Animation Domination. I want to know your thoughts down below on these shows. What do you think of these shows? Are there any specific ones you like? Are there any ones that you specifically hate? What do you think about those shows? Let me know down in the comments below. And I want to thank you guys for checking out this latest edition of the Reviewing Network Live. There's going to be a couple more of these coming up in the next couple of months. And I think with the next one, I will talk about when the actual show will premiere. So stay tuned for that. But until then, thank you for watching this and listening to this. And I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts down below. I'll see you guys next time. And until then, take care.